I'm not the least bit sorry for any of this. American serial killer Carl Panzram, toward the end of his life, confessed that he had committed 21 murders, more than 1,000 acts of homosexuality, thousands of robberies, and arson crimes. He was also quite far from repenting. In his own words, he uttered the words I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I'm not the least bit sorry for any of this. About 30 years before his execution in 1930, Carl Panzram had committed acts of violence without any hesitation. Even being behind bars could not prevent him from terrorizing his fellow prisoners. Before being hanged, when he was sent to prison, he promised the warden that he would kill the first man who bothered him, and he kept his word. According to authorities, Panzram's sadistic behavior was directly proportional to his upbringing full of constant neglect and severe abuse. Carl was born on June 28, 1891, in Minnesota, as the child of a family of East Prussian immigrants. When Carl was still a small child, his father abandoned the family. At the age of 12, where he stole cake, apples, and a gun from a house in the area, he committed his first theft. His first theft brought him to the Minnesota State Training School, where he was beaten, raped, and tortured by school staff. When he was released in his youth, he soon ran away from home as well. Carl later moved to another place. According to a report, on one of his journeys in a train wagon, he was gang raped by a group of hobos. The event deeply shocked Carl, and how would it not? Later, he said that it left him as a more disciplined, sicker, but cleverer child, or a child who would soon start to mercilessly rape others. Meanwhile, he continued robbing train wagons, burning buildings, and robbing innocent people he encountered during his travels. In fact, in 1908, the thing that got him in trouble once again was theft. He was convicted and sent to the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Regarding his experience at the reformatory, he said, "Before going there, I was a pretty rotten egg, but when I left, whatever good there may have been inside me had been kicked and thrown out." After being released, he went back to his bad habits and became a more violent criminal since he attacked and raped most of his robbery victims. He was caught and convicted many times for various crimes, especially theft, meaning Carl was not a difficult thief to catch. But there was something. The extent of the crimes he committed would not be known until years after his death. In 1915, Carl Panzram was sentenced to 7 years in prison in the Oregon State Penitentiary after he was caught stealing once again. Life in the state prison was quite difficult. Again, according to a report, the guards probably did not like Carl because he refused to cooperate with the authorities, and they literally turned his life into hell. They beat him, hanged him on beams, and threw him into the cell. When Carl was in solitary confinement, he had very little to eat except cockroaches. During his first years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, he helped one of his fellow inmates, Otto Hucker, escape from prison. But there was something. While Hucker was escaping, he killed the prison warden, making Carl an accomplice. That was the first murder crime he was involved in. Carl decided not to walk around the prison. He escaped in 1917, but was caught again and returned to prison. The man who escaped from prison after being caught stealing was certainly going to be caught again while escaping from prison. Not giving up on his failure, Carl escaped again in 1918, and only a few years later would start a terrifying murder spree on the East Coast. In 1920, Carl Panzram managed to steal enough money from the house of former President William H. Taft to buy a yacht thanks to an unusually successful theft, and he named his yacht a Kiska. In the same year, Carl managed to lure American soldiers in New York onto his yacht, where he raped them, killed them, and threw their bodies into the Atlantic Ocean. Later, he confessed that he had killed 10 people this way. In the end, the yacht sank and Carl decided to head to Africa. He boarded a ship and soon landed in Angola, where he raped and killed a young boy. According to psychiatrist Helen Morrison's book, My Life Among the Serial Killers, Carl later wrote about this horrific event as follows. When I left him, his brains were coming out of his ears, and he would never be deader than that. However, Carl did not settle for only one murder in Angola. He wanted more destruction, more blood. A few days later, he killed 6 local guides who were going to take him crocodile hunting. In his words, the crocodiles later gladly ate their bodies. About a year later, he got bored of living in Africa and decided to continue his life somewhere else. His next port was supposed to be Lisbon, but it turned out that the police in Portugal were looking for Carl, who had come to their attention because of his murders in Africa. Carl now felt trapped and decided to return to America. When Carl returned to America, he continued his crimes. Now here, he began raping and killing boys. He was strong enough to overcome most of his victims, but although Carl was a frighteningly skilled killer, he was a very bad thief. In 1928, he was again arrested for theft and sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, but this was not the only crime for which he would be punished while there. After admitting to murder, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Carl Panzram absolutely hated prisons, especially Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. He tried to escape again, but failed this time. The guards caught Carl and beat him senselessly. A year later, Carl killed the laundry supervisor by beating him with an iron bar, which is why he was sentenced to death. For Carl, the death sentence was almost like a dream come true. As he once said, just like people do on their wedding night, I am looking forward to sitting on the electric chair and dancing at the end of the rope. When human rights activists tried to intervene on his behalf and stop his execution, he despised them and openly said he wanted to kill them all. Strangely enough, while on death row, Carl managed to make a friend. A guard named Henry Lancer felt sorry for Carl and gave him $1 to buy cigarettes. Soon after, the two became friends. Then he started giving Carl pen and paper to write, intending to encourage him to write his life story before he died. Carl agreed and wrote his murders in chilling detail, word for word, without holding back. Lancer later published Carl's writings in Panzram, a journal of murder, in 1970. Carl Panzram had only a year to write his life story, as he was hanged on September 5, 1930. He was 39 years old when he died, and almost no one, perhaps except the warden, felt any sadness for his death. Carl's last words before execution were, "Hurry up. While you're waiting around, I could kill a dozen men." Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.